Well, welcome back. Are you hanging in there? We are going to go through Chapter 11, which is part of Week 10 or Module 10. It's the second part, and this is entitled Low Vision and Blindness. I've hoped you've read this at least 5 times. I know this has to be your belief system, and it's a belief system that we want to empower our at-risk learners and children with disabilities to have. So would you take a minute and please look at this video. It offers some information about visual impairments that will be a source of learning for you. Chapter overview. And you know what? I'd like to offer an apology for my stuttering at the last slide. I remember now that YouTube was a vignette offering adaptations in the classroom, and it did some examples of low vision. I'm sorry, I just couldn't bring that forward to tell you about that. But by now I know that you have seen that YouTube. So let's look at the chapter overview. By the end of this chapter and experiencing the assignments, you should be able to answer these questions. You should be able to understand how the category of visual disabilities can be divided into 2 functional subgroups. You could group the students on the basis of the severity or the amount of functional use that they have, either as low vision or blind. Or you could group those students by age of onset, or you can group those individuals who are legally blind, which qualifies folks for special tax benefits and materials, and those that are not legally blind. At the end of this chapter, you should be able to discuss ways to accommodate the general education setting for students with visual disabilities. You could position low vision students where they can benefit from the instructional activities, like closer to the lecture point or away from the glare of a window. Make your classroom safe, eliminate dangerous obstacles and hazards, and provide consistent organization and expectation so that they can anticipate the physical and instructional environment. You would be able to explain why orientation and mobility targets must be an intensive part of the curriculum for students with visual disabilities. You know, these orientation and mobility skills are needed for independent living, for maintaining a household in the future, for transportation, for personal care. And we have O&M specialists that would provide those supports. You would be able to research the types of assistive technology that benefit people with visual disabilities at school, in the workplace, and in independent living. But don't forget to ask or work with the specialist, the resource teacher in visual impairments that would be part of your school district or ISD support. And what are the issues surrounding Braille in reading literacy? Well, by now you would have, or through this process, you'll become aware that Braille instruction is not uniformly or consistently available in schools, and not enough teachers are proficient in Braille. And if you have a child with intellectual disability, teaching Braille may be a challenge. What we've been and what's on the horizon, I'm wondering if your first vision of a person who is blind might be a singer like Ray Charles or Helen Keller. So being blind is a very external and obvious disability, and there were supports in schools available for the blind early in Europe. People with low vision, though, they have wide needs. Their visual efficiency is has a wide disparity. How much they use the remaining sight is all over the board, and that continues to be a challenge for teachers and families. Low vision and blindness defined. So for people to see normally, 4 elements must be present and operating: light, something that reflects light, an eye opening, an eye processing that the reflected image into electrical impulses, and a brain receiving and giving meaning to these impulses. Types of visual loss can affect visual acuity and peripheral vision. The degree of visual loss can be divided into 2 categories, or 2 subgroups: low vision and blindness. Individuals with low vision use sight to learn, but their visual disability interferes with daily functioning. Blindness means that the person uses touch and hearing to learn and does not have the functional use of sight. And visual disabilities may be congenital, present at birth, or adventitious, acquired. Characteristics: students with low vision and students who are blind. And this YouTube vignette offers under how you might begin to understand the visually impaired and steps you could take to effectively interact with these individuals. Students who are blind differ greatly from students with low vision. Many of the students who are blind do not read print, but have printed material translated into non-print format, like recording, print-to-speech, or Braille. And they typically use aids to move around. For some, learning how to socialize and interact easily does not come naturally. Prevalence. Visual disabilities are clearly associated with increasing age. The proportion of children with disabilities is much smaller than the proportion of people with this disability in the general population. Causes and prevention. Well, the most common cause of blindness among children are complications caused by premature birth or heredity or accidents. Medical advances such as gene identification, laser treatment, surgery, and corneal implants can reduce the incidence of visual disabilities in children or lessen the severities. Technology would be a support to overcome the challenge of low vision. And technology, as you know, opens up a whole new world for people with disabilities. Assistive technology can consist of visual, audio, or tactile input devices. Assessment. Early identification of visual loss is critical, not only to reducing its impact on learning, but also to prevent the problem from worsening. Pre-referral, school-wide visual screenings still take place and can help identify students with visual disabilities and help them get needed services. Usually the local health department provides visual screening. Under identification, visual assessments can be done by ophthalmologists or optometrists. Acuity and field and vision are evaluated. And state testing or district testing, there would be needed accommodations. They may need accommodations during the instruction. They may need large print or braille testing. Early intervention. Well, play, because of their disability, blind and low vision children play very differently from others, and they appear to be delayed about 2 years behind their sighted peers in the development of play skills. Often you'll find that they enjoy noisy play. Under independence, O&M, orientation and mobility instruction, should begin with a very young child so they can acquire independent mobility skills. Teaching students with visual loss, access to the general curriculum. Well, a large percentage of students with visual disabilities spend over 80% of their school day in general education. One of the singular characteristics of this group of learners is the variety of ways in which they can access information. In all cases, teachers agree that literacy should be a goal for each student with a visual disability, and that direct instruction of print or braille is the best way to help them become fully literate. Most students with visual disabilities require accommodation and assistive devices. Well, assistive devices behind eyeglasses, to access the general education curriculum. One important rule applies. Each individual has different needs, so different responses to those needs are necessary. Think universal design. Universal design for learning uses technology to allow individuals to adjust the size of print or meet their visual requirements, to translate print into speech or convert print into braille. Well, and under technology, we have two commonplace low-tech devices that can be of great assistance to students with low vision. Small handheld magnifiers come in handy in near vision situation. I use those, you know. And handheld telescopes come in handy for far-sighted activities, such as reading off a chalkboard, projection screen, or even reading street signs. I worked with a student once who had that on a headband and would simply slip it over his head whenever needed. The YouTube that I'm referencing provides teaching strategies for blind students. Please watch this. Transition, post-secondary options. Well, you know, I read that, or perhaps it was in your book, 16% of first-year students with disabilities attending college report having visual disabilities. But fewer than half of these visual disabilities enter college, graduate. Their reasons for leaving college are usually based not on the academic demands, but rather on living independently and the challenges and difficulties. Transition to work. Despite their high educational levels, adults with visual disabilities have a harder time finding and retaining employment. Adults with low vision experience more success than their blind counterparts. Access to the community. Many adults with visual disabilities express frustration about their limited access to recreational, leisure, and cultural activities. Collaboration. Well, collaborating with related service providers, TVIs, and O&M instructors. Well, a TVI is a special educator who specializes in visual impairment and serves as a resource to other educators. It's like a teacher consultant for the visual impaired. The TVI would have knowledge in instruction, assessment, and of agencies that can link the teacher and the family. An O&M instructor is an orientation and mobility instructor, and this person teaches the skills necessary for the student to independently navigate their classroom, school, home, and the community. Partnerships with families and communities, teachers make an important difference to parents, sometimes with an action as simple as being a good listener and providing support. Well, we're closing up on this chapter. The summary is that visual disability is the smallest category in special education. Integration with individuals with visual impairments into the norm or the mainstream is difficult as an adult. And we have stereotypes, of course, that impede their participation in the American life. I offer you some resources. Please take advantage of them. And we've come to the end, so I'll say goodbye.